Hello and welcome to this tutorial on the topic of using the Config Drift and Audit app. With this session, we're going to be focused on the Config Drift functionality. So if you are taking the Gluware test drive, you will be able to follow along and run all the steps I'm showing here. In this session, we're going to cover how to take your initial snapshot of your configuration, which sets default configurations, and we're going to look at when a change happens, how Drift detects that change, and how you can take a look at the results and get into how you could accept a change or remediate it. So let's hop into the Gluware platform here, get signed in, and again Gluware is going to navigate me back into wherever I timed out or signed out. So I'm navigated into the Device Manager app. So I'm going to use the navigation on the top right and move into Config Drift and Audit. And what you're going to see with Config Drift and Audit, it should be, and there's pretty much no circumstance I can think of, where all the nodes or devices you've imported in Device Manager should be unified or synchronized as you view Device Explorer within Config Drift and Audit. So all the same devices we saw previously we'll see here, and the only difference is that you're going to see different fields available in your grid. So you do still have the same kind of Device Explorer functionality. If you've watched that tutorial, you've learned about how to go in and turn on or off different elements. Like I may want to bring back in, something like the host name, and I may want to drag that over here. So you can organize it however you like. But again, now I have name and host name, which are duplicates, so I can do what I did in the other video, which was I can come in here and remove name. Again, name was provided by a spreadsheet or entered it when you add a device. Host name is read from the device. So you have your set of devices, and the key column you want to pay attention to when you're first working with Drift is captured status. So when devices are first added, discovery has taken place, and we have stored a version of the config file called the latest snapshot. We've stored it in Device Manager. However, you have not used Config Drift and Audit yet, so there is no initial capture inside this application. So with this application, one of the first things you want to do is select your devices. Generally, you want to work with all devices here. You're not kind of hand-picking devices. Generally, you're kind of looking across all your devices, you're doing an initial capture, and then you're monitoring all your devices for change. Drift, or this part of the app, is highlighting any configuration that has changed compared to the previous default snapshot, which we're going to get into. So you select your devices. I did a Control A for all, and then you want to use this snapshot, take a snapshot action here from the toolbar, which is capture snapshot, and execute that. When you bring that up, you have a quick dialog. You can name it. You can do everything you've selected. You can apply a filter. Filters can be very powerful because you can build a filter that states you want to, you're filtering on all Cisco devices or all whatever your filter may be. Any device that gets added into your inventory that matches the filter will also get added. So you will be, if you do apply a filter and are scheduling it, those will get included in the filter. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to use the selected devices I have. I'm not going to name this snapshot, and then I can either execute a start now or I can schedule it. So we're going to talk about scheduling a little later. Let's go ahead and hit start capture. And what you're going to see is similar to when Gluware went out and interrogated the devices for the inventory. Gluware is capturing the configuration, and you're going to begin to see these icons come in. These interlaced circles basically mean there's no change. And the reason there's no change is that if we jump in and pick on like spoke 1 here, if we double click on it, on the left-hand side, we have a starred file. It says when we captured it and said, this is our default config. The first time you ever execute a capture, that becomes everything you're comparing to, because it's the only known state. Right now, Config Drift does not have the notion of, like, let's say, a golden config file to compare to. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we get into Audit and as we get into config modeling about implementing kind of golden configs. But basically, we've captured a configuration. That's what's running. Now we are ready to detect change. So essentially, you're kind of, let's say, arming it by setting an initial configuration. The other thing I want to talk about is, as I've clicked into this guy, pod 1 spoke 1, I can view information about the device. So this is consistent with what you see in Device Manager. If I go in this view, I can see the snapshot that have been taken. And if again I drop down here, again, is where you can see all the various snapshots. So we're going to come back to that as we take snapshots. This view or this icon is consistent with Device Manager, which is what is the configuration or that current config view. That's what you see here. And then a fairly important one here is activities. And activities are where you can see everything that Gluware has done on that device. And so you can go back and look at previous ones, or if you have any failure for any reason, you can come in here. And when you see this icon here, you can float over it and look at the log. Just like all the other logs where we're interacting with the device, you can double click on it and open up the log. And similarly, as you're going to see, and again, the device logs were unified in 4.0, so they're all consistent, and they've been upgraded in a sense to give you a better user experience with color coding and timestamps. You're going to see, what Gluware is doing, and all of the green is the response from the device. So whenever Gluware is interacting with the device, we're going to re-execute that device discovery to capture the basic information about it with a show there's a library of commands, show version, show hard, various things, and then we're going to capture the whole config file. We're doing a show inventory, show boot. Again, these are part of the kind of pre-commands we capture out of the device to understand if it's in a known state. And though this information is updating or populating the grid that you see here in Device Explorer. So again, I scroll through and I can see everything that happened. So just want to highlight that very, a lot of details available in that log view. So now let's get to creating something interesting here. So we can close out that view, and we're sitting here and we're waiting for a change to happen on the network. So because this is a controlled environment with limited access, we can't really wait for something random to happen. We're going to navigate over into the model editor where we expose a terminal window, and we're going to go ahead and make a few changes. So we were picking on spoke 1, so all you're going to want to do, and again, if you're following along with the test drive, you can do this. You want to make sure you're clicking on the N for node icon, which are the devices, and then from a filtering standpoint, you can either look at all your devices, or in this case, I'm actually kind of working with primarily the Cisco iOS, one particular device. So I can filter on iOS-based devices, and it limits my view here, filters my view of my devices. Then I click on spoke 1. I just click on it one time here. I can select it. And then in the lower window here, if you don't see the terminal window open, if it's closed for some reason, you have a bar on the bottom of your application that you can click on and open up the terminal window. If for some reason your bar is kind of coming and going, you can pin the bar. So, for example, I pin the bar and make sure those icons are pinned on the bar. A little bit of, housekeeping kind of for the Gluware app. Next, you can hit this connect button, and the password in the test drive environment for the Cisco devices is lowercase Cisco, and password is Cisco. Just keeping it simple for test purposes. Hit save, and now it is connecting. And keep in mind, in this environment, we're SSHing into a proxy device, and then from the proxy, we're SSHing into the device. So it takes a little bit of time to get that connection up. Okay, so the whole purpose of connecting here on a console or CLI view is to go ahead and make some changes that we're going to detect with drift. So we like to pick on a few, simple configurations. So we're going to pick on NTP or Network Timing Protocol and DNS. So I'm going to say show NTP config, and I see that the NTP server is there, and I'm going to say show IP name servers, and I can see 2 name servers are there. So in terms of drift, you want to drift and be able to have visibility to anything that's been added, deleted, or changed. So let's go ahead and make two changes. We'll do an add and we'll do a remove or a change here. So we'll go to config T and we'll say no NTP server 172.31.255.11. So we're kind of blowing away that NTP server, and then we're going to say IP name server, and we're going to add 8.8.8.8, a Google name server. Let's say, hypothetically, some ops engineer is trying to solve a user's problem and is just kind of slamming in a change, let's say an unauthorized change to get something done. So I can say exit, and I can either save that change or not. I don't have to save it to memory in this case. So we've created change. Now navigating back into the config drift and audit application. Now, when will the engine run and determine if drift occurred? You have two options here. You can always do it ad hoc, meaning you are on demand, which is you can execute a new snapshot. Or what most users do is when you get this rolling, you schedule it. So again, I'm going to select all my devices and I'm going to say snapshot. If I was going to be doing this in more of a regular daily operational sense, I would go into schedule and I would schedule it. And this will go into the scheduler, and this would be on a repeating, usually daily. And I can tie in an email notification. And you want to know when change is occurring, and drift is a great way to do that. So I'm going to hit cancel on the timing in terms of scheduling, and I'm going to come back to just executing a start capture. Again, on-demand capture, and it's going to execute across all of these devices, and it's going to tell me if any change has occurred. Okay, so now drift has done its job, and as expected, or as we let's say we expected to come out here, is that this icon means change has been detected. So from the original default, the first snapshot, comparing that to the new snapshot, there's a change. So all we do is we double click on that node, and you're going to see the comparison view here. And so right away, just very quickly looking at this, I can see there are two changes, and I can highlight, if there are more changes, it'd be maybe more interesting to step through them here, but just to show you how you can navigate this, it was showing two changes. So here's change number 1 of 2, and I can see that this name server was changed and the 8.8.8.8 was added. The other thing I can see here, if I again just use this, I can see that the NTP server configuration was removed. And so what we hear from customers all the time is how much they love having drift and having the visibility of what's changed on the network, because it's a tremendous time saver when they come in and there's some tickets open and maybe users are complaining about they don't have access to something or something's changed, and everyone's trying to say, well, what changed on the network? Drift can tell you exactly what changed, and again, our users can identify something and correlate it right to a ticket and then get it resolved. And so let's step through a couple options here just to kind of complete this, and that there are like 4 different views you have here. This leftmost one is this kind of compact view where you're only seeing the snippets of config with timestamps and that are interleaved here. This next one is a side-by-side showing the whole configuration file. So again, it's just a more verbose, full-length config where you're seeing all lines of config and exactly what changed. Moving on, this one again is a side-by-side and is, gives you the full long-term view. And the final one is, as you scroll down, it's showing the two interleaved on top of each other, which for me it's hard to view personally. So I tend to definitely prefer the side-by-sides. And if I'm looking to try to get a quick answer and even understand, if you like this the shorthand standard naming, kind of concepts here, that this is a very quick way to see exactly what changed. Now, the other thing I want to bring up is that you have drop downs here, and you can kind of, let's say, go back in time or you can compare any previous, say, any 2 points in time of a capture. So this is also quite useful because sometimes network problems or problems that affect users don't come up until a week later or a few days later or a month later, and you may want to know what changed. Another benefit we realized out of it is that many customers have to go and document any changes that occurred in a given period of time, like a month or a quarter or maybe a year. You can come in and select, from the beginning of the month capture to the end of month capture, and you can see exactly what's changed in a configuration. So I don't have enough captures to show you that here live, but I'm sure you can understand where the value is I can look at beginning of month, end of month, or I can look at beginning of quarter, end of quarter, and I can see the deltas, and I can download those out of Gluware. So let's just wrap on one final point around drift, which is, what do I do now? I have drift. Well, you really have two options. One is that, when you look at this config file and this new change, I can either star it, meaning I'm okay with the changes and I want it to be the new comparison going forward. That's what this action does. Or I can remediate. And if I remediate, that just means I'm bringing it back to a known good state. So because I know what happened, I can go and remediate this manually. But as you probably know by now, Gluware automates configurations, and when we get to the config modeling demonstrations and tutorials, you'll see how Gluware can automate the name server config, automate NTP server config, and restore these back to a good state just by using a provisioning. So we're going to get to that pretty quickly coming up. So stay tuned, and that concludes this tutorial. Thank you very much.